All right, welcome to a new episode of the Future Proof You podcast, and this is brand new framework, and I'm so lucky to have Ash Maurya with me. Ash is the author of Scaling Lean, which is on my bed table at the moment, and I've just had a course with Ash for Intention Week on refreshing all my knowledge of the Lean canvas. How are you doing, Ash?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm still listening through the replay of your course because it was so in-depth. I've been facilitating the Lean Canvas for over 5 years now, but man, you blew my mind.
Well, always good to hear.
All right, so do you want to do a quick intro? So for me, the way I came across you was about 6 years ago when I was facilitating in my classroom, and I was facilitating the business model Canva, and I was really not happy with the tool because it was too for mature companies. And one student submitted an assignment with a different business model Canva, and he goes, "What's this? It says problem in there." And that's how I came across your work, and I was just amazed. And I started reading your book, and now you're live here from Austin, Texas. Do you want to tell a bit more about you, your family, and your business?
Yeah. So if I start with myself, I've been an entrepreneur for a really long time. I've always just had the bug. Some people know they wanted to be entrepreneurs, but I didn't know why. For the reasons, the purpose reason became clear over time. But in the beginning, it was just I want to build a startup. I want to build something cool and amazing. So the first thing that I did was join a startup. I didn't do my own startup mostly for like immigration, legal type of reasons. But that in hindsight was a good experience because I got to learn a lot more about that startup process with other people's money before mine. But then made a lot of mistakes of my own along the way. And really the what you're describing in terms of the tools and the books were really my way of trying to introspectively codify my own learning through my early journey as a startup founder. Made lots of mistakes. So when people sometimes read my book and say, "I wish I read your book earlier," I tell them, "Me too. I wish I had read this stuff earlier, because it could have just avoided a lot of those years of going down the wrong path." So that's a little bit of the entrepreneurial side of things. I am married. I've actually been married for a really long time. This is I know COVID year, but it's also going to be our 20-year anniversary, and actually
nice.
So 20 years together, and I've actually known my wife for 5 years before that because we met in college. So really long history with her. We have 2 kids, Natalia and Ian. Natalia is going to turn 14 at the end of this year, and my son's going to be turning 12. So they're both kind of in their tween and teen years, very much, yeah.
Starting to give you trouble.
And I actually dedicated, this may be interesting since we are, talking family, but I dedicated the first book to my kids running Lean. So you brought Scaling Lean, but I dedicated it to my kids because I was running a startup and I had 2 kids that I was juggling, kind of on the side. And it's basically, it taught me how to be more efficient with time. So the code is, for Natalia and Ian to help me appreciate the true value of time. That was the code. Because before kids, you can negotiate with your wife, with your spouse, with your significant other, work a few more hours on the weekend. But once you have kids, it's just hard to say, well, you can't say no to a crying baby, but also when they're older, you just can't say no to them. You have got to spend time with them. And that was a very important aspect for me. So I had to really organize how I worked. And in hindsight, it made me a lot more efficient, a lot more lean. So really, that's why I give them credit for teaching me just the appreciation for time.
I love it. How can you say no when your 4-year-old daughter goes, "Daddy, you're not working this weekend, okay?" Like, okay.
I'm not now. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I really like the backstory behind it. All right, so I always like to start with, how do you future-proof your family? Is there anything that you do with yourself in order to be stronger and to keep that motivation to run the business? Because, well, you're your own boss, right? There's no one else motivating you.
Yeah, so constraints are a big thing for me, and also trying to plan one's time, and that's the only currency we really have where there's some control. I mean, we've got obviously sleep, so you got to take that time out, but then the waking hours that we have, you have to decide how you want to spend your time. And I'd seen this quote many years ago, but we all get the same number of hours. It's what we do with the time that defines us. So that really struck me, very, very hard. And when we do any kind of budgeting, people usually run out of time because they get into the calendar trap. I take a different approach where I start with non-negotiables. So I generally have 4 buckets. Family is one of them. My work is another. My health is a third bucket, and then finances or financial considerations is another. And so in my calendar, and you can look at the calendar on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, but I carve out little appointments with myself where I have these non-negotiable buckets of time, and that's how you kind of build habits, and that's how you build a life where you're hitting on all those cylinders. So I'm not one to be like, I invest, but I'm not one to be looking at my stocks every day and worry about it. So that's probably the smallest bucket I need to spend time on, but I do need to spend time on it. And then I balance everything else out. So how much exercise I get, how much time I spend on my work. And then weekends are sacred for like family time. We've got certain rules, like we don't all eat breakfast. So I skip breakfast, but all the other meals, dinner is a family activity. We always have together. We have, I think, for the really as long as we're in the same city together. If I'm not traveling, we'll always have dinner together.
Nice, yeah. When you say those 4 buckets, does it mean that they are scheduled in your calendar as well? I mean, you said you remove yourself from calendar, but do you mean that you make time for each of those non-negotiable and then you move everything around that?
Yeah, so I was explicit, and I still do that, where I will go and put certain things on my calendar just so other things can override it, especially when it's during working hours, like exercise. So one of the things I do is I have a daily practice of doing yoga or some exercise, and if that's on my calendar, no other meeting can come and override that. So that's like a non-negotiable. And sometimes other things that are on the weekends and things, there's no conflict there. So I did start off by carving out time on the calendar, which also served as a reminder when I was learning it. But once you build a habit around it, then you don't need it to be on your calendar. So that's a bit of a hack that I do, is use the calendar to block off time and get these little pop-up notifications, like it's time to do this, time to do that, so that you get into the habit. But now, for instance, I don't need a calendar appointment that I have to spend time with my family. Like that would be, kind of silly, but it's helpful in the beginning to just say, here's how I'm dividing up my time.
I agree. I was reviewing my calendar yesterday, and I do exactly the same thing. And I've got in my morning 7 to 8, like exercise, and I'm like, and that was really important for me to build the habits. And now 6 months down the track, I'm like, of course I'm doing exercise. I don't need to put this in my calendar anymore. All right, awesome. So I like the 4 buckets. So one was family, the one was health, the other one was finance. What was the first one?
Work. So
work. Oh, that one.
Yeah.
That one. All right. Well, let's move on to work. So then, I would like to. The question is always, so how do you future-proof your business, right? And here we're gonna. I'd like to use the lean canvas as a way to audit that, or as a lens to do it. And well, doing it with you, who actually came up with it, I think that's going to be a lesson for everyone. So how about you take us, and I think we discussed that beforehand, how about you take us through one of your earlier businesses, give us like a tiny bit of origin story, and then let's go through the different steps and see what went well, what didn't go well, and how you were able to assess that with the lean canvas. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's perfect. And this was actually rather nostalgic, because this is almost now going to that 10-year-old idea. This was the idea that I stumbled into after my daughter Natalia was born. And it was, it's a very common thing, is that we go about our lives as entrepreneurs, and then one day we have a triggering event. We see something and it inspires us. And one of the most common ones that I see are parents who, when you become a first-time parent, you start becoming an entrepreneur. You start inventing things. I already was an entrepreneur, so I had that, but this definitely sparked an idea. So one of the things that I observed after we had my first child was that the way we were taking pictures, the photos and the videos that we were taking, the rate at which we were doing that just exploded. Neither myself nor my wife would take lots of pictures. We would take pictures when we went on holidays, but that was about it. We were not, shooting things all the time. But once you have a baby in the house, you're taking lots of that. Not just that, but we didn't have a lot of time to do this, but we wanted to do it to capture these memories. But the other piece that was interesting is that both of our parents, the grandparents, were living in different parts of the world. And so they wanted to see the pictures more than, like we didn't need to see the pictures, we were just capturing them. But they wanted to see it, and they would threaten us with threatening phone calls and emails about coming and taking their grandkids away because we weren't sharing enough pictures with them.
Cool about motivation.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I stumbled into this, and I said, why aren't we, sharing things? And so I turned to my wife and I said, why aren't we sharing this more often? And she was expressing a lot of frustration with the tools that were currently there. So if you look at the Lean Canvas, which maybe we can put on the screen. So
yes, I'll put it on the screen, yeah.
Lean Canvas is a nice way to kind of capture the story of your idea. And I like to call it the story because we have to start with the customer journey. We have to imagine not what we want to build, but who we want to build it first. And that's where the customer segment comes in. So there you'll see I talk about parents and family members. So parents are really the customers of this idea. And the family and friends kind of around the parents would be the users of this. They would be consuming, this content. Early adopters, I found that not all parents share equally. Those who have younger kids will probably be sharing, baby pictures more frequently. And that's where I started. And this will, again, morph with time. So the idea of the Lean Canvas is that we start with our best understanding. And that was my best understanding. And I try to stay very true to that in our conversation. And then on the problem side, we start to imagine, okay, what are we seeing? And so this is where, with my conversation with my wife and also doing some research for her, I began to see that indeed, when you're sharing baby pictures, you're worried about privacy. There's a lot of content. You're doing video. This was, again, 10 years ago, where there weren't solutions like Dropbox and many of the other things that we use. So what are people using? And she had tried a lot of the existing alternatives in the left box there, things like Flickr and SmugMug. I don't even know if they're still around. And Apple Mobile Me, Facebook was just getting started, but lots of privacy concerns. So she wasn't really satisfied with any of these. And that was the spark of the idea. That was an idea that popped in my head saying, I'm an entrepreneur, I can build something. And so that's when we start going down this journey of, what could we build and how could that be better? So I'll kind of leave it there and let you maybe comment or.
Yeah, exactly. Because just going to try to give a visual for a lot of people who will be listening to it. What I really like about the tools that you adapted from the business model Canva is you get to see your entire business concept on one page, right? So you described, all right, on one side, I'm going to put my customers, and then on the other side is going to be their problems. And what you really focused on is, yes, you talk about your customers, which are family and friends and parents, but then I think what makes very specific and very important here is you narrow down on the early adopters, right? And you mentioned like parents with young kids. Can you remind us why it's important to focus on those early adopters? Why can I just it started with your own parents wanted to see the pictures, so why don't we cater to them first?
Right. Well, and this is the story of every idea. If you look at any big idea and think of Apple, Facebook, Google, whatever your big mainstream customer company is, they all start out with a much smaller niche or early adopter segment. Even though Bill Gates had a big vision, it's not that their vision was small. He wanted to put a desktop on a PC on every desktop. But when you looked at how they launched, they were talking to a lot of techies who were playing with PCs because it was more like a hobby, the Altair and all these things. And so you start with early adopters who get what you're trying to do. They're more visionary, or they have the problem more acute than anyone else. So when we are rolling out a product, it's hard to get everyone on board. When you try to sell something to everyone, you end up selling to no one. So you do have to narrow down, but you want to find the ideal early adopters. And this is, again, where I can show you an updated version of this. So my first attempt at the early adopters was, let's go after busy parents. And what makes a parent busy? It's probably having
Yes.
kids, younger kids. But as I began to interview some parents, you'll notice this is a slightly a few weeks older version of the canvas. I refined my early adopter segment to first-time moms with kids under the age of 3. So you can see how tighter it gets. And when it gets tighter like that, you also get a clearer visual. And what I was learning is that, at that time, and probably even true today, is most of the moms were doing the sharing than the dads. Not always the case, but that was generally the pattern I saw. I also found that having a first child is more of a triggering event. It's more of a change in the parent's life because they're new parents. They haven't done this before, versus having maybe another toddler and then having your second child. So I can even say that when my daughter was born, this was a much bigger problem than when my son was born, because by the time my son was born, we had 2 years to figure this out.
And what I like about this is you fill up the first lean canvas, so your first overview of your business with your own understanding, your own hypotheses, and then straight away you went and talked to your early adopters that you had at the time to test if it's true, and you were able to refine it, right?
Yes, and that is, I think, what is the power of a tool like this one, compared to, say, a business plan where we lock ourselves in the room and we try to write this fictional novel of the best, perfect, ideal business. But if you don't do any learning, if you don't do any testing, we end up writing a fictional business case or business plan that doesn't really stand the test when it gets outside the building. So with this approach, we even tell people when we coach them today is don't even spend more than 30 minutes. So put a timer, 30 minutes. Take a snapshot of your best thinking, walk through these 12 boxes and fill them out to your best understanding. And don't read books, don't obsess about perfection. Just take a snapshot and then assess, where are the gaps, where are the pieces that you don't know so well, and go get some answers. Sometimes that could be talking to potential customers, which I did. And when I actually, funny story there, because being a dad, I talked to all my dad friends who had recently become dads. And they would all point me to their wives as well. And that's how I got this idea that, okay, it's not dads who are sharing. I didn't do it, but I don't know if all the other dads were the same. And when they all inched me to the moms, I realized, oh, this is really the customer segment. Yeah. And to even break the ice, I took my wife along, because it's kind of awkward to go and to go and talk to a first-time mom with a newborn and interview her. So I said, some of these were friends with my wife. Why don't I bring her along and we can, turn it into a lunch conversation? And we made it very casual, and it was more fun. So she broke the ice, and then she turned to me and said, now you can ask your questions. So
your interview is ready. Go for it. But what I really learned in your course a couple of weeks ago, what became really clear is. When I work with entrepreneurs, is we always focus on your early adopter, and it's always hard because we want to serve everyone as always. And the experience is to go to the early adopter. But in the course, you went even further. You basically said you would like to reach product market fit, or even better, to break even on your business just with your early adopter. And that really, in my mind, it just sparkled, because I'm like, wow, that means we should only worry about the early adopter at first, and that it makes life so much easier. Like you don't have to worry about all the other ones, and you're gonna have to discuss their problem. And I don't know, it was such a big relief for me.
Cool. Yeah, there's always a Goldilocks challenge with the early adopter. If you make them too small, you run out of them very quickly, and then, as you said, you have to figure out new customer segments, new marketing, new value proposition. But if you can pick it, and if it's too big, then it's too broad. You're not talking to anyone. So there is a right sizing, and that is one of the tests we use. Is can you get as close to product market fit? That's the ideal. Get to product market fit, but as close as you can. And if you look at this segment, if you ask yourself even how many kids are born on any given day in the world, there's a lot of them. So there are a lot of, and then how many of them are first-time parents? There's quite a bit of them. And we will, of course, naturally at some point, maybe in year 1 or year 2, start broadening this to not just first-time parents, but maybe second time or third-time parents. But the idea is that it's still a big enough market. There are lots of people that fit this category. It's not a customer segment you can just count on your fingers and toes and be done. It's a big enough segment to go after.
Awesome. And so then you tested with your with the first time moms. You tested their problems. Did you find that the problem was the same that you had made the hypothesis?
Actually, no. So this is again where this is always a very typical thing. Is we make a assessment, and there was a problems. I wouldn't say that people didn't struggle with sharing, but they had their workarounds, and even my wife did. But as an entrepreneur, we take this innovator. I call it the innovator's bias. When we see a problem, we think we have the perfect solution, and sure enough, everyone should just use our solution. And so when I went and talked to parents, yes, sharing photos and videos was hard, but their workaround was, let's just not share so many photos and videos. Let's just select the best ones and send an email out to grandparents and keep them happy. They don't need dozens of them. They need 2 or 3 a day, or maybe 1 or 2 a day. That's enough, right? So they're just getting something. They're getting an update every day or every other day, and then that was fine. So that was a workaround. And then it's so tempting to say, well, if I could make it easier so that you can send 20 photos a day, would you do that? And that's the wrong kind of question, because you are asking people to say, you're leading the witness. You're basically saying, if I build something, will you like it? And people out of politeness will be, sure, and that's a great idea, you should go do it. But that's, again, a very false positive, because when you do build it, the real test is, will people use it? And you don't know till they actually use it.
This is such a big problem, because very often we go to our friends and family first, and then we put the bias in them, and then they're just too nice to say, no, you're wrong. And then we start building a solution that is just not what they're going to use anyway.
Yeah, there's another author, Rob Fitzpatrick. He wrote a book called The Mom Test, but I love the title of the book because it has to pass the mom test. If you go to your mom and say, do you like my idea? Of course, she's going to love everything you say. But that's not the litmus test. And again, when you ask those leading questions, your friends are going to encourage you mostly, and so you want to avoid that. So I didn't see, and the way that we actually test for true problem is that you want to see what people are doing. So if I hadn't seen a workaround, if I had seen a parent saying, I've been wanting to share 20 pictures a day, and I wake up, I'm getting 2 hours less sleep a day just so I can solve this problem. That to me is problem validation, because they really want to get this done. But when they say, I'm okay with just sending 1 or 2 pictures over email, that to me is not a problem. That's a must-have problem. They have a workaround, and yes, maybe they'll send more pictures with my solution, but maybe they'll not. Maybe they'll just be fine with the workaround they have. So I had to look for another solution, which I actually stumbled into. And let me see if I can go to that next version of the canvas here. But I'll maybe just talk to it while that kind of loads up. Maybe it's actually not in this, and it does not as important. But the problem that I did find people lose sleep over was backup. It was not so much can I share pictures, but many of the moms started opening up to me and telling me that what really keeps them up at night is that all their baby pictures are on this one laptop, and if that should crash, they're going to lose all these precious memories. And they, if I had a backup solution, if I could recommend a backup solution, that would be something that they wanted to ask me about. And a light bulb went in my head, because we were sharing in the cloud, and when you put something in the cloud, you're automatically backing it up off of the laptop. And so I said, oh, we already do that. Why didn't you tell me you have a backup problem? And she looked at me and said, well, you never asked. You were talking about sharing. I didn't know you could do backup too. So that's the danger we run into when we pigeonhole our customers into even our problems that we think they have. You have to have a more open mind, where you can explore these tangential problems, and that's where you might find a much bigger problem.
I love what you just say. You said, oh, but we already do that. And I mean, so many times with a lot of entrepreneurs I work with, they realize through their customer interviews that what they had built or what they were doing themselves, they already had it, but it wasn't exciting for them because they already had it. But it's about realizing that it's exactly what the customer needs.
Yes, it's you have to see the product from their eyes. We see it from our eyes. And for me, what was more interesting was the fact that I could share pictures with no uploading, and that was the cool part. But the customers didn't really care about that. They cared about the backup piece. So yeah.
So you had figured out your early adopters as moms with first-time kid under 3. The problem was the backing up, really, and so your solution was to provide backup. Where did you move to then into your lean canvas? What was the most important thing to validate?
Yeah, so if we take a step back and walk through the process, so I sketched out my canvas, and again, the places that I focus in on, I recommend people sketch out the full canvas, but really where you dive deeper in the beginning is really getting that better understanding of things we have talked about. Who is your early adopter, and what real problems are you solving? And the best way to get those answers is go and talk to some of them and understand how are they solving the problem today? Is there really a problem or not, like in the example I just gave? And one of the things that will immediately come up is how they're solving it, but also what are they using. So in the sharing world, the existing alternative, the competition, I had listed all those products before. If you look at this version of the canvas, I removed them all and I put email there, because that's what most parents were doing, is they weren't using some fancy, solution out there. They weren't uploading pictures. They were just using email. So even though I said I can help you upload, they weren't even doing that. So that was a new thing they had to do, which they didn't want to do. So that's when I realized that this was not the right canvas. And so after you do those discoveries, you come back and you do a pivot. You come back and say, well, what are problems worth solving? And there is another version of this canvas, which I don't have on the screen, but we can talk through it. But that's where backup became the value proposition, the thing they wanted to be able to do. And we created a seamless solution where, by way of just taking pictures and putting them on their laptop, in the background, it was just being synced with the cloud and it was being backed up. And they could also share a link to their, they could select certain pictures or share the link to everything. So they could also share, but sharing took a backseat to basically that backup solution. So that's kind of how that process unfolded in terms of diving deeper into customer problem, really understanding what is it that the customers really valued, and then positioning or prioritizing that in the build step. And that came a few weeks later, or even a month later. But that's how we prioritize what to build instead of building and then realizing we built the wrong thing.
And when we start drafting those ideas and started doing interviews, I mean, it's always important to make sure that it's gonna be a sustainable business, that it's worth investing on it. Like, how do you make that decision? What's your back of the envelope calculation?
Yeah. So again, in all transparency, since we're trying to keep this as true to the time, back then I wasn't using this technique, but I learned it shortly after this product launched, that I should have done this earlier, and that's what we recommend people do, is this backup envelope. So ask yourself this question, which is how we frame it, is that every entrepreneur out there should think about what they want out of their idea. Don't think about how big my idea can get. Think about what I like to call the minimum success criteria. So if you're going to work on a good idea, it's going to generally take you at least 2 to 3 years if it's a good idea, to really get to product market fit, and then many more years to grow it after that. So you're spending many years of your life. Potentially, if you look at Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs, they dedicate their entire lifetime, and Mark Zuckerberg's still alive, but he's going to spend he spent a lot of time in Facebook, something he started in his college years. So ideas will consume years of your life. So the way I like to think of it is, ask yourself, what kind of a business model outcome do you want? Do you want to build a big company? Do you want to raise money? Do you want to, have 100 people working with you, or just 3 people working with you? Those are like important questions to be asking. So I read this in a book somewhere, is that build a life plan before your business plan, right? So figure out what kind of an entrepreneur do you want to be? And that's an important deep why question. And if you can answer that question, then come back to your lean canvas and now start to ask yourself, can this idea get me there, right? Is the market big enough? Is the pricing that we're charging big enough or high enough to where we can make this model work? So that's how I look at ideas now, is I don't look at it as I've got a big idea and a small idea. To me, all ideas have to hit a certain outcome if I'm going to spend time on them. And I then will come up with the idea, do a lean canvas. And then the key metrics box, I do this back of the envelope calculation to basically try to understand how many customers will I need at what price point to hit my minimum success criteria goal. Even when I was writing my book, I took that approach. Is I said, if I'm going to spend a year writing a book, I better sell at least 10,000 copies. And everyone will have a different number. But to me, that was my goal. If I can't sell 10,000 copies, I'm not going to write this book. And so how can I test that? And so I basically took 10,000 and made it into a litmus test, which for me was getting 1,000 people pre-ordering my book. If I can't get 1,000 people to pre-order my book in 3 months, I won't get 10,000 people buying it in 2 years. And that became my litmus test. And so I didn't write the book. I went and sold the book first, just with a table of contents and a book cover, which was a very early version of the book cover. And I got 1,000 people to say, I'll buy, and here's my $20 as pre-order. And that was when I said, okay, I'm going to write this book. So that's the kind of thinking that one needs to instill in testing ideas.
And the power of the Lean Canvas here is that you can actually make those decisions of if you've made your life plan and you know the outcome that you want from this business, because this is where you're going to spend your time. You've got all the elements here to actually make an educated decision, because you talked about all your key metrics, how many signups or how many books I'm going to have, and then you can match that with the outcome that you have for yourself. You're not trying to make. It's not really a back of the envelope calculation based on aspirations. It's really you actually have the key elements in front of you, so you can't really lie to yourself, right? It's there. I mean, it's who the customers are, the problems are, the solution, what the metrics are you looking at, roughly how much that will cost you. And I guess one of the things that you mentioned is a big cost will be your time, right? Like in writing your book or developing that product, and it has to be there, right? I mean, your time has to be there to help you make that calculation.
That's exactly right. Yes. And the other way of just saying what you said is that it's a bottoms up model. So people will always delude themselves with the splitting pie approach, which is I'm going after $1 billion market. We could say that, parents spend billions of dollars on their kids. And so if I only get 1% of that, I'm going to make hundreds of millions of dollars with this idea. And that's a very false illusion that we create for ourselves by latching ourselves into a big market. Yes, you want a big market, but you are still selling one solution of hundreds of products that parents will buy and hundreds of alternatives that they could use to solve this problem. So bottoms up really helps you from figuring out, yes, your pricing and what parents are buying and how you would compete. And so doing the bottoms up model is a more realistic indicator of how big your idea can get versus just saying I'm going after a big market, so we'll be successful.
All right. So now tell us from where did you see the weakness, or where did you see the right thing that validated through the Lean Canvas that helped you either continue the business or stop it?
Yeah. So it really is this iterative process. So the story we've been describing is you will take a first snapshot of your idea. The next step is to ask yourself, what is the riskiest thing? And for me, the riskiest thing, I alluded to it being customer and problem. Why? Because if you don't get the problems right, no one's using your product, no one's buying it. So you always want to start there. And if you can with my early interviewing, I got on the right track to where we were now positioning it and parents were coming in and saying, yes, we want backup. Yes, this is something we care about. Then you roll it out there and you have to now ask yourself, what's the next risky thing? And oftentimes that, comes to maybe solution or channels. Like can you really get enough parents to learn about this? Like, how do you get, you've got your friends to use it, but how do you get strangers to use it, right? So those become the immediate risks, and those were things we were navigating. Your solution also becomes risky, as with any product, it's not going to be perfect out of the gate. There is still an art to building good products, and so you have to iterate and work on it. So that's where the focus starts to shift in some of those types of areas. And that was just a journey that we were taking. And so I would revisit the canvas on a periodic basis, usually every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, to pause and kind of see where we were, how our metrics were looking, where are the next risks, and how do we move forward from here.
It's funny. I usually have my Lean Canvas on my fridge. So this way, every time I go back to my fridge, I've got the opportunity to see it again, and then I start, I need to scratch this because this is what I've tested. And it's that idea of building the habits of reviewing it, because it's very nice to build it once and to frame it, but I think the way I described it to my kids, because I was during isolation, we talked about the lean canvas for their own business. I really described it as being like the treasure map for your business, right? You're following the crumbs to find to your treasure, which is the outcome that you were looking for. And that treasure map is clouded, and you need to update it all the time, and you need to keep it with you. So I really like the fact that you keep saying that it's you have to iterate on this, and that becomes the anchor of your of the business development, really, because you go back to it and you update what's working, what's not working. And so many times we don't keep track of what we're testing and we're not testing, and then we lose so much time. So this is really the way to save time.
That's and I love that analogy of the treasure map, but it's exactly that. It's that you don't quite, like, you know the destination, but you don't know how to get there, and so you have to take a few dead ends and come back and then take a different path. And that's just how startups are. There's no startup in the world that I know of that had an idea and had an overnight success. They just went from point A to point B without a lot of experimentation and forks in the road. Sometimes media gives the illusion that you've got these overnight. Even if you watch the Facebook social media movie, right? It's like Mark Zuckerberg just wrote some code. The next thing, he's a millionaire, and so that's how we just pass through all the stuff the hard work that they really do, where they're not sleeping and they're going through a lot of those dead ends and trying to navigate their way to the right path.
I agree, and I love that you've kept the history of those lean canvases, so you see where you've been through, and you can show people it was not an overnight success. And so, what happened to the business in the end? Did you build it? Did you deliver it? What did you do with it?
Yes, so there was a parallel track, and this is another piece to also highlight. So when I got hit with this idea, I put this out there, and one day I got a call from a wedding photographer, and he said, I'm a parent and I saw this website, but I'm also a wedding photographer and I have the same problem. Could I use this for that? Could you, instead of integrating, so we had some integration with iPhoto and consumer photo apps. He's like, could you integrate with Photoshop and with Lightroom and all these, products that I'm using? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. And he's like, yeah, well, I'd really like to use this, and I'd even pay more for that. And so that's when it hit me that there's really another customer segment here also that is willing to pay me even more money than the parent. So should we consider that? So I actually created a separate canvas for them, which looked a lot similar. And this is where taking an idea and looking at it from the lens from different customer segments can be helpful. And this is what that one looked like. So you'll see some elements are quite similar than the one before, but in the solution box, it becomes more of a pro app. And that's how we actually even launched this. We had a Cloudflare app and a Cloudflare Pro app at the same time, because in the beginning, they looked exactly the same, but over time, they started moving in different directions, which is another thing that we encourage is don't just fall in love with one implementation or one customer segment. In the early days, you need to explore, you need to find where is the ideal market for your particular opportunity. But with this idea, to answer your own question, we got pretty far. We actually got this in the hands of customers. They were using it. And then I actually decided to sell the business. And it was not because it was not because something was not working or something that I got an acquisition offer. I decided to sell it because I had another idea that I was tinkering with, which was essentially Lean Canvas. That was a side project that I was working on that I got more passionate about. I wanted to really work with entrepreneurs. And this is another thing that I think is worth highlighting, is that when you're building a startup, you want to look for customer problem founder fit. So even before, we talk about a lot problem solution fit, like what solution should you build for your problem? But even before that, I started encouraging people to think about founder problem fit. Like, do you really love the problem that you're going after, or founder customer problem fit? Do you really love the customer segment you're going after? And while I wanted to build a product for parents, I found it more exciting to build a product for entrepreneurs, because I was an entrepreneur and I could relate to them more. Here you could see I had to talk to moms, and I was not a mom. So it was a very different segment. When I was working with photographers, I was starting to go to like photography events, like wedding events and things, which again, I was doing for the business, but it was not where I was in my element. But when I was talking to entrepreneurs, I felt like that was my thing. So this is again where it was another idea that I was working with, and again shows how you can work on many ideas in the early stages in parallel. And Lean Canvas won. So I decided I'm going to pursue that idea, and I didn't dead end these ones. I actually found a buyer for this product, even at the stage it was, and was able to sell Cloudfire to another entrepreneur who took this further from here.
I love it. So from Cloudfire, you managed to sell the business, and you also got it helped you refine the idea of the Lean Canvas, which became now what you're known for, the 2 books and the courses and the Medium. What I also really like in what you just said is you said, we found another customer segment, but instead of putting everything on one map, you decided to build another map. And I think that's something that's critical, because we start putting everything in one map and then it just doesn't link anymore. I mean, you said in that case it was the same problems, but the solution was different. And I think we do that as well when it's multi-sided market. I mean, we're not going to go into the details here, but having the options to go, okay, so I'm going to have one map for each of them, and you get to stay precise and specific on each of them. I think that's a really good hack to have.
Yeah.
Ash, thank you so much. I mean, I think it was a good way to look at the Lean Canvas, a good way to look at your business that originated in your own experience as a dad, and you shared a lot of wisdom on the way. I'm going to have a very complex job to pick the best part to promote, but this is always a good problem to have. What do you want to leave the audience with? The audience is made of dads and moms who are starting the business or want to start the business. What do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, so the best advice that I can give, and actually it's really the tagline, I'll go back a little bit, but love the problem, not your solution. That was a lesson that it took me many years to really understand, is that I look at the entrepreneurial journey as being a lot like an artist. When we start out we create art for ourselves, and then we try to bring it to the world. But if you switch perspective, and that sometimes works, I'm not saying that doesn't work, but if you switch perspectives and you really start asking yourself, which problems need solving, which doors should I open with the keys I want to build, that creates a much better path for entrepreneurs, because it's going to be challenging to find the right customer, find you have to find them. It's a very deliberate thing. And that was a lesson that I took from even these early products, is chase the problem, chase a customer and look for problems, and then put your entrepreneurial hat on and build a solution, and don't fall in love with it, because it is going to change and iterate, as you saw even in my example.
Yeah.
And that's just the key to success, is if you can build a problem that fits the customer's world and causes them to buy your product versus the alternative, that's when you find something that really, really indeed works.
Awesome. I think for the serial entrepreneurs in the room, this is so critical. Just love the problem, love to learn who has it, what is the core problem. The solution doesn't matter. I mean, I love how you made the solution box on the Lean Canvas so tiny.
It had to be there, because if it's not there, then the makers don't want it. It becomes a business doc, and I wanted it to be a maker doc. I came from a technical background, so I needed solution, but I also knew that needed to be the smallest box, because I was the expert on the solution. I wasn't the expert on the other boxes. So, yeah.
Exactly. I love it. All right. So, to which place do you advise us to go in order to follow you? Will be LinkedIn, Twitter. Where are you at?
Yeah. So I spend a lot more time these days on LinkedIn. So that's definitely where you can find me, and I post some things there. I also have a blog that I haven't. It's fairly up to date, but I need to do some more posting there, but you can definitely find a lot of my writings on there. The best place to find that is just head to leanstack.com, and you can venture off to the blog. There are also some of these online, what we were using was the online tool. So if you want to create a Lean Canvas, play around with it for free, you can create an account and check it out online there too.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for testing this new concept with me, of this new framework for the podcast, and I'll see the feedback that I get from my audience. But I'm really liking the idea of, let's review your current business with a Lean Canvas, so we can pinpoint everything. I think the learning that I get at this stage will be for the interviewee to have the lean canvas filled up already, and then we can go and poke to see what are the holes and the weaknesses in there. What's your last advice on this?
Yeah, I think, and I've actually done something similar, and I still do, like in terms of open office hours. Even when I was writing the book, I basically made a call for anyone who had a lean canvas that wanted feedback. Come and let's just talk about it. And it's amazing how much ideas are crystal clear in our minds till we put them on paper, and then we start doubting them. And when we tell somebody else the idea, we start doubting them even more. So even just that conversation can be super helpful. Can I explain my idea so that you can understand it? And if not, what's confusing? And that back and forth, that is also a key to more clearly and concisely getting your idea, which is very important because we live in an increasingly crowded world. If I go in front of a parent, imagine a first-time mom with a baby who's crying, or maybe the baby's sleeping but could wake up at any moment. I only have like 3 or 5 minutes to communicate my idea to that person. So you have to get, that's high pressure. So that's why you start practicing that with folks like yourself. So I think it'll be a brilliant format to kind of play around with.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's what I do with a lot of entrepreneurs already. So I think the caveat will be, are they willing to share it or not? But I think the more you're willing to share, the more you can actually get feedback from the audience, from others, and trigger ideas. I mean, I love the example that you had is like a wedding photographer stumbled onto your concept, and then it became another customer segment, and then it became how you sold the business.
Yeah. So one thing I would just say on that note, because I think I hear a lot of first-time entrepreneurs not wanting to share ideas, but I can tell you that everything that I have been able to accomplish over the last 10 years came from me getting outside my head and sharing the idea with someone else. So even the sale that I made with the business, even the lean canvas, if I hadn't done a blog post on it, nobody would have learned about it. It would have been a great tool just for me. So you have to share your ideas. The key part is you don't have to share the secret sauce. So even when we're talking about the lean canvas, like if you looked at my idea, you couldn't really steal how I did certain things, because I'm not going to tell you those aspects of it. Like there are still parts of it that you don't really talk about or don't have to talk about. We're talking about customer problem and value proposition. Like if I came to you and I said, in this tough time of COVID, I can help, new graduates find their dream job. Come and use my service and we can get you the best job that you're looking for. That's a great promise, and people might come to me and maybe I deliver on it. How I do it, I'm not going to tell you, and you don't have to get into that. And that's the piece that, you still protect.
I like it. You're absolutely right. Like what's on your lean canvas is not secret. Your business, your revenue model is not secret. Your unique value proposition, that's what you want to share with your customers anyway. So yeah, no, I like that. Okay, that's going to be my sales pitch by now. You're not sharing your.
Yeah, and test it with any big business. Take Airbnb, Facebook, take Google and search engine. You can put their business model on lean canvas, but you can't steal their idea because their unfair advantage is not on that lean canvas. It comes from other things they have built internally.
Cool, awesome. All right, I'm gonna go out there and get more people to share their lean canvas then. All right, well, thank you so much, Ash.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks, Julian.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, take care.